Hey guys, welcome back to the Former Farm Kid channel. As we mentioned previously on our last video, we were going to take a general look at really our first attempt at a black walnut crotch cut slab table. And the crotch is right here. The two limbs, one of the bases were here. The other one is here. And that crotch effect runs pretty much down to about right here. And then it kind of streams to the end of the table. So this limb here, that grain, runs for this limb, runs all the way down to about right here. This is all crotch material here. So we'll look at it from this direction, and this is what it looks like with no finish on it whatsoever. So this is looking at it from the other direction. A little easier perhaps to see the crotch as it runs up through the center. We've decided to go with keeping the bark on. We have a special process we use to attach that to the table. And it's basically done by cutting a kerf on the backside and filling it with wood epoxy. We've had pretty good luck keeping that hanging on. A couple of the other effects here. The end checks, we had a couple of those. This was filled from the backside, sealed here, sealed over here, and hard to tell, but that check is solid epoxy. So that will not separate anymore. We also have the bow tie fasteners, which you have to be very careful about. I found out, unfortunately, when you route over the table, if you have another pass to do with a router, like unfortunately on this table I do, I actually pulled a big chunk of this one out. So I literally had to put the jig back on and route out the rest of the old one without overcutting, which was something I really didn't want to do, but I really had no choice at that point. So I'm going to be very careful when I make my second pass over the table here, and back the router on in certain places so it doesn't catch an edge. This is just slightly proud of the surface, so if you do have to approach it on the upwind side of your router, be very slow. And I think it's probably, I don't know if approaching it parallel to the grain or across the grain is best. It's really hard to say. I made this one a little bit deeper. It's full of glue, so hopefully it will hang in there. It's white oak, some of the strongest material I could find. I did want to contrast with the black walnut, so that is why I chose white oak. It's got very strong mechanical properties. And as you can see, this table unfortunately has these little ridges to them. This slab came in such bad shape from the sawyer. Part of it was my fault. I should have told him to cut them thicker. And either the saw passed through it too fast or the blade was dull. And the slabs came back with just tons of undulation. I mean, up to 1/4 inch. So I thought, I'd end up with an 1.5 inch table, and I'm actually down to 1.25 inches now that I've had to take so much off to remove that undulation. This effect right here, I kind of like. This was filled from the back as well, taped over with gym mat tape. And because of these ridges, it kind of ran horizontally or perpendicular to the fill. And again, it was filled from the back. It did a good job of sealing over the smooth part, but it ran down these edges. The majority of this will go away on my second pass with the router, although I kind of like that effect. I mean, if you can get a good stitch look, it's actually not a bad look. All right, so the prominent feature on this is what I call the shoreline or cliff, ocean or lake to the cliff effect. And the difficulty on this is making a waterproof seal right here on both ends, because you do not see too many tables that have blind ends to them. So it requires sealing to the table, and down on this end, it required sealing to the bark. Well, bark isn't smooth, so where the polyethylene comes around the table, there's a real risk for having a major leak there. And I'm going to take a pause and go ahead and remove my shoulder here. This has sat for over 5 days now, so it's good and solid. It's 3 layers. The first layer is the blue. It's only about 1/4 inch thick. The next 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch is the big fill, and then on top of that went is about 1/8 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch thick of UV protective, so that the top clear never clouds. So get a little closer here to this. We tried to give it somewhat of a wave effect into the pour itself, and that was semi-successful, but not terribly. And again, like I had said earlier, we saved the bark. We are saving the bark, and it really gives a nice, like a cliff, ocean coming to the cliffs here all the way along the side. And it's important too to get the side of the bark that slopes away so that you can see the full effect of the bark. The other difficult thing on doing a pour like this is that there is no support for the outer edge of the epoxy pour other than the end points down here and down here. And inevitably, this table is going to be lifted by somebody by grabbing the epoxy. And if it were only held by the 2 ends and its adhesion right here, well, there'd be a good chance of just ripping it right off. So what we had to do is kind of give it the, I'm going to call it the log effect, even though obviously these are pretty bad looking logs. Bolts had to be epoxied in. These bolts penetrate a minimum of 4 inches into the bulk of the table, and they are epoxied in. I let those dry a couple days down here, and then another one up here on the very short end. I can't remember for sure, but I think I embedded a screw right down here too to support this tip of the pour very well. Whether or not I did, I can't remember at this point. So I'm going to take a break here and go ahead and remove my shoulder, and then I will show you how I went about making this waterproof seal. Because I got to tell you, this stuff is so expensive, you don't want to take any chance of it leaking out. Okay, so here's a front row seat. This particular end was not too challenging, or at least not as much as the other end. And here's what I did. As you can see, I've used tape to wrap all the way around the table. So this piece goes all the way down underneath, and then it turns and runs along this direction. So what I did was the end of this plastic sheeting, the polyethylene, runs all the way down. I think I went about halfway. We'll see here in a minute. Take this off. Okay, there is the end of the polyethylene right there. So we have overlap. Here is 5-minute epoxy from here to here. So it spans equal distance on both sides of this joint. The tape overlaps both, so you have a double seal. As you can see, there's not strong adhesive. Very next to nothing sticks to polyethylene, but there is a small amount of adhesion. So when that 5-minute epoxy dries, it is stuck to it. The tape just is an assurity that it stays stuck to the glue, because the glue, the 5-minute epoxy, is really what is stopping the leak. As you can see, none of it got by, or you would be seeing blue. It stopped right here at the edge of the epoxy, this portion right here. And again, the tape is just insurance, and also to keep it stuck exactly where you want it. So you have a double seal. So here's the other side. Hopefully the light is good enough here that you can see this. The challenge here was this is all bark. So the plastic cannot conform to that bark. So here is basically what you have to do. Sealed it up the same way. You can see where the polyethylene ends, right here. Again, this is the first reveal. It's the first chance I've had to look at it as well. Tell you what, tape holds pretty good to the polyethylene, that's for sure. So this is tape right here. And I took and wrapped that all the way around the corner, just in case. Let me get it from back here. So when the tape makes the corner, it's sort of like a little pool. So if any does get by, it would have to go this full distance to leak out. And as you can see, again, this is the end of the polyethylene right here. This is all tape. And the tape really does stick, even to epoxy. So basically, and hopefully the light is good enough. Okay, and make sure, got a little extra light here. This is all the pour. And what I did, let's see if it's going to be real obvious here, real visible. So what I did to make sure no epoxy got past this point right here, this portion right here is a solid mass of 5-minute quick setting epoxy. So you take and fill in all the gaps on the bark so that when you seal to it, let's see. Again, this is the end right here. There is some extra, this overlap is tape. Here's the edge of the tape. This is the end of the polyethylene. So the polyethylene epoxy went all the way to here. This is actually where my epoxy wall is that I built, so that it takes up all the little divots in the bark, and you have a flat, smooth surface in which to then epoxy the polyethylene underneath and over the top, and then wrap it in tape. So you have, in this case, it'd be like a triple seal, because it's sealed underneath, and you can see none of the blue got any farther than right here. And the epoxy underneath doesn't start till back here. So that was never an issue. So it did perfectly stop it. What I'm going to do is tip it up here in a minute and look at what it appears to look like underneath, because not only does it need to seal here, that's really the critical juncture, but underneath the table, there has to be a joint along underneath here that seals as well. Otherwise, it's just going to all leak out underneath. And I'll let you be the judge if you like this effect. It's almost as if there is water, that it's a pool of water contained within the epoxy. I know the light here is probably messing me up, but there is the edge. Once I get it up into the air here, I may try to shoot it again. But So you can see the difference. The blue looks like water being contained within the epoxy. Kind of cool. So as you can see, the bottom of the pour, because there's nothing beneath that pour, it needs to be supported. So this becomes the base of the pour that supports it from beneath. All right, well, we're on the back side now. So what I did was cut the polyethylene. Pretty hard to see the edge here. I believe it ends. It's hard to really tell because there's a layer of tape over this. But the polyethylene runs, and this divot had to be filled as well. Polyethylene runs in this fashion, right along here, all the way up to the top. This was all sanded smooth so that nothing could get through. Any little imperfection seems to be obviously where it wants to run out. So it was sanded. Again, this is the back side. You can see how much got through, but it's not sealed up here. It's only sealed back here. So there's very little leakage anyway, because the backer board I had, that piece of plywood, was very, very tight. And just that friction, that pressure alone stopped the majority of it, but you cannot rely on that. So again, the polyethylene plastic cut in that shape, 5-minute epoxy underneath the edge and then up on top of the edge. And then this is all tape on top of it to hold it tight. So let's see. And frankly, I'm actually kind of surprised that the plywood that was screwed to this did that good of a job holding that back. That's good to see. That's like an extra layer. So here comes the tape with the polyethylene. It is a good thing that this gym mat tape does stick to polyethylene, because as you can see, the epoxy does not. It just pulls right off of there. These are little folds that got into the polyethylene that I could not get flat. And fortunately, they don't stick up above the surface. So from the top, you do not know they're there. Gym mat tape, pretty effective stuff. You can see here, hopefully, let's see if you can or not. Here is the edge of the polyethylene, cut in this shape to go around right here. All this divot had to be filled in with 5-minute epoxy so that anything that got by here would not go through the tunnel. This is all tape here, I believe. There is the end of the polyethylene. So underneath it, on that edge, it's actually right here on the black line. Underneath it, 5-minute epoxy. On top of it, 5-minute epoxy, and then the tape on top of that. And as you can see, absolutely nothing got by it. I'm going to film the last little bit of the tape coming off. And the reason for that is that tape actually is sticking very, very well to what was liquid epoxy. So that's kind of a good thing to know. And again, this is the back side of the table. And like most guys, all I'm going to do is give this a coat of oil so that it dries equally to both sides, even though this has been air dried for a year and a half or so. So looking then again, what we have, this is where the epoxy laid, right along there. That plastic was cut to this shape. I traced it and then cut it. 5-minute epoxy underneath. Although because there's so much of here, I might have used regular liquid epoxy and just given it a couple days to dry. Epoxied over the top of the edge and then taped on top of it. And if you've done this before and you go, oh, all I ever do is tape, well, you know, that's great. It looks like it would have worked in this instance as well. But I'm here to tell you, when you're pouring that liquid, it's a good feeling to know you have done absolutely everything you could possibly do to contain that mass. So a couple other things. This was all poured from the back. This was done with regular liquid epoxy to really create, I guess you can't see it. To create a bond along this check here so that it cannot pull apart any further. It could separate, you know, up farther, but I'll tell you what, it's not going to separate within the footprint of this epoxy. And the blue divot on the other side, this is actually it from the backside, because I could see it actually went all the way through. And as you can see, the tape did a really good job. I can't remember if I put any epoxy on this or not. I don't think I did. This is just a tape stop, but there's so much tape that I wasn't worried about it. It almost snuck out on me there. I didn't get that quite far enough, but it did hold. So all these other inclusions and imperfections you see on here, again, it's underneath. It won't absorb any oil, but it doesn't need to. It's got this sealant going. This fill right here was just extra epoxy I had to fill this void, basically. So that's kind of the lay down. I'm going to lay this piece down. It's like ridiculously heavy. And we'll have one more look at what it looks like without the plastic on it. Okay, so here we are, back to flat. Here is that one little divot I was talking to you about. So here is basically what it looks like. A little bit of air there, maybe. Hard to tell. And obviously this is going to take some card scraping to kind of get that even, that doggone polyethylene. This is only 4 mil. It just kind of got bunched up on me and I could not get it flattened out. Hard to see, but that's a real square edge, so take a card scraper to work on that. So that basically is the Shoreline cliff effect, and that bark will never go anywhere. It's there forever. And the logs are what's keeping it there. Okay, guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. Any questions, comments, please leave them in the box. I appreciate it all. Tell me what you think. And obviously, when I get it all done, get finish on it, get that top re-leveled, I'll certainly make another short clip for the finished product. All right. God bless. Keep up the great work. We'll see you on the next time.